Hey, what's up guys? Unit 522 here. Before we begin, I want to give a special thank you and a shout out to my good friend Wormy Horror for joining me in this video. Me and Wormy go way back to when I first started narrating stories, and I don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for him. So after the video is done, be sure to head over to his channel and check it out. A link will be below in the description and at the end of this video. Enjoy. Number 3. This happened many years ago when I was in my early 20s, working in a nursing home. The home cared for a maximum of 60 residents, 30 on the ground floor and 30 on the second floor. The home is laid out with entranceways at either end of the building. 15 rooms, the day room, followed by another 15 rooms. Ending the room corridors are the nurse stations. The dementia unit was on the second level. On the night when this incident happened, I was working the night shift. We normally would have 3 staff to a floor, but on this night, we were understaffed. It was just myself and another nursing assistant that was in the dementia unit. I was in the east section nurses station, and they were on the west section. I was using the space and quiet time to get some paperwork done. I had my nose buried in my work. The ward is pretty quiet at night, so it's the best time to concentrate on these sort of tasks. About halfway through my shift, around 3 a.m., I look up from my desk, and I was startled. Staring back at me from the other side of the counter was Mrs. Taylor, one of the dementia residents on the east wing. But the reason I was so taken aback on this occasion was that Mrs. Taylor, not only frail and elderly, but she also had bad hips, and walking without staff assistance is not her strong suit. However, I regained my composure and asked her, "What's wrong?" There was no response from her. Mrs. Taylor is not much of a talker at the best of times, but being asked direct questions usually gets a response. "Mrs. Taylor, is everything okay?" No response. "Let's get you back into your room, yeah?" No response. I began to feel a little uneasy as she was staring right at me, almost right through me, with no expression on her face. Walking around from behind the desk at the nurse's station, I placed my hand on her arm to guide her back down the corridor to her room. She was ice cold. It was in the middle of the winter, but even so, she had an abnormal body temperature. No words were spoken from her, despite me asking her a few random questions in the short walk back to her room. As we approached the room, I let go of Mrs. Taylor's arm and opened the bedroom door. Before turning back around to help guide her back to her bed, I was frozen in shock. My skin broke out with goosebumps as there, lying in bed, was Mrs. Taylor. I didn't want to turn back around to see if there was anyone standing behind me. Without getting the chance to think this over, I noticed something seriously wrong, and my training kicked in. I approached the bed and found no pulse. The doctor on duty was called to the unit. That was my last shift at the nursing home, and this night has played out in my mind over and over ever since. Number 2.
When I was about 2 or 3, my parents moved into an old farmhouse that was just over a century old. The house had a good-sized backyard, which was great for playing in. I would often sit in the yard with my little bucket and shovel, pretending to look for dinosaur bones or other such treasures. One day, when I was around 4, I looked up from my digging to see a pretty lady in a worn blue dress standing about a yard away. Being a naive child, I figured this lady was a friendly neighbor and asked if she wanted to play with me. Though she did not answer me, the woman solemnly pointed to a spot on the ground 3 feet to my left. Figuring this to be some sort of new game, I moved to that spot and began to dig. Month after month, the lady would periodically visit me and we would play our game, with me digging holes all around the yard. After about 5 months of her appearing to me, the lady pointed out a spot near the old well in our yard. The stone structure had been around as long as the farmhouse and had been boarded long before my parents bought the place. Approaching the well, I knelt in the spot the woman had pointed to, just a handful of steps away. Like all the other times, I began to dig with my little plastic shovel. I was a determined little kid, and so was unperturbed when the dirt began to pile up. About 2 feet down, a stark white object began to appear. Excited that I was finally about to unearth that dinosaur bone I had long been searching for, I began to dig even faster. Soon, a pile of white was revealed, and I wasted little time in pulling out one of the small lightweight objects. Turning with a smile to show my finding to my friend in the blue dress, I was disappointed to see she had left again. My disappointment was short-lived, however, as my mother took that moment to exit the house, no doubt coming to call me in for lunch. With my prize in hand, I rushed over to my mother and proudly showed her the white bone. "Look, Ma, I found a dinosaur," I shouted at her. Her face went from smiling to sporting a horrified expression in a matter of seconds. She let out a scream and knocked the object from my hand, pulling me quickly inside the house. I guess someone must have called the police, because men in uniform soon came to rope off the backyard. For the longest time, I never knew what all the fuss was about and why the police officers had to take my dinosaur bones away. Immediately after that incident, my family moved to a new house in the middle of nowhere, a couple of states away, and the event was eventually forgotten in my mind. It wasn't until later in life when I stumbled across an article on the house that I truly understood the events of that day. The article stated that the house had been converted into a restaurant, and that the establishment was known to be haunted by a ghost named Elizabeth. Apparently, the original owners of the farmhouse were a sailor named Daniel and his young wife Elizabeth. Historical accounts say that Daniel went to sea on a voyage that was to last several months. As 3 months passed, then 4, then 5, Elizabeth began to become lonelier and lonelier. Sure that her husband had died at sea, Elizabeth gave into her loneliness and had an affair with a young farmer that lived nearby. Just over a year and a half since he'd left, Daniel returned home from his extended voyage to find Elizabeth had had a child. Knowing the child couldn't possibly be his, Daniel went into a murderous rage. Fearing for her life and the life of her child, Elizabeth tried to flee, but only managed to make it as far as the well in the backyard. Ripping the child from her arms, Daniel roughly flung the babe to the ground, immediately silencing its cries. Elizabeth fared a little better, and found herself backed up against a stone well. Daniel yelled and cursed at his unfaithful wife. Whether intentionally or not, Daniel roughly shoved Elizabeth, causing her to fall backwards into the dark depths of the well, where she met her watery end. Afraid of being convicted of murder, Daniel dug a shallow grave for the child and boarded up the well. According to the restaurant workers, Elizabeth, to this day, still roams the grounds looking for her baby. Having read that article, I broke out in a cold sweat with the realization that those dinosaur bones I had once dug up were probably, in reality, the bones of that poor, murdered child. And that woman who was my playmate, looking back, I realize now that her dress was a little too worn and her face a little too pale. But I don't know why. If I found her child that day, Elizabeth still wanders around. Perhaps it is because the police still have those bones in evidence, locked up far away from its mother. Or perhaps it's because the bones do not belong to Elizabeth's baby. Did I mention I had a younger sister that went missing?
Number 1. I would like to share with you one of the creepier haunted house stories I've experienced growing up. Everything said here is very real and burned into my memory forever. I will never forget that touch. It all began when I was 6. My family was going through some hard financial times, and in turn, we moved into my great-grandmother's farmhouse. This house was from the 1800s, 1862 to be more specific. The farmhouse was large, 2 stories, and we lived on the second floor, above the kitchen and the dining room. At first, there was nothing more creepier than the well in the basement and the secret passages throughout the whole house that connected various parts to one another. You could start in the woodshed, which was located between the back of the house and the barn, and you would end up in the attic 2 stories above by using these stairways. The layout of the house is relevant to the story. The main staircase to the second floor is accessible through the living room. Once at the top of those stairs, there's a bedroom to your right and left, and a bathroom that sits at the beginning of a hallway on the right-hand side back corner. My room was down that hallway, and through the back of my bedroom was a door that led to my parents' room, so I was essentially sandwiched in this farmhouse. My cousin, who we'll call Ethel, lived with my aunt in the bedroom at the top of the stairs that was to the left, and my great-grandmother was to the right. And of course, my parents were beyond my bedroom, with the door closed. It was the morning of my 7th birthday, a cold day in October. I was lying in bed, wishing someone would get up so we could begin the day. As I laid there, probably no earlier than 6 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door in the hallway. Someone's awake, I thought. My cousin was also excited for the birthday to begin. I quickly closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. The footsteps came down the hallway and stopped right outside my door. I heard the latch flip up and the door drag across the wooden floor as it opened. I could sense someone standing by my bed, which was against the wall on the left as soon as you entered the room. What persuaded me to keep my eyes closed, I will never know, but to this day, I cringe when I think of what I might have seen had I opened them. I still figured that this was my cousin trying to surprise me for my birthday, so I lied still, pretending to be asleep. I felt the bed compress next to me as someone sat down on my mattress and stared at me. I could feel the thing's eyes on my face, but I kept my eyes closed. I mean, what was my cousin going to do on my birthday? Scare me? This is where things get weird. I felt the bed shift like someone is trying to settle in and get more comfortable. I then begin to realize that my cousin is not just sitting next to me, but is leaning over me. I can tell she's close because I can feel her weight hovering over me. I kept my eyes closed, realizing now that I couldn't open them, even if I wanted to. Then I felt a hand over my eyes and nose, pinching my nostrils shut, making it so I could not breathe or see anything. Before I can even react, I feel a hand fly over my mouth, holding it shut. It takes me a minute to realize what's going on. I thought to myself, why is my cousin trying to suffocate me? I laid there confused and scared to move, wondering what was going on. And then, it's over. I feel the hands removed from my face and the weight released from my bed, springing it back into shape. I do not hear anyone leave or the door open again. I open my eyes, staring up at the eaves, trying to figure out what's happening. Why would my cousin come in and play that kind of trick on me on my birthday? I look around, listening, realizing that the house is completely silent. No footsteps from my grandmother, no purring cats wandering the halls, and the snores of my family permeating around me. I flip back the covers and sit on the edge of my bed, feeling my face. It feels hot and prickly, like pins and needles. I get out of bed, open the door to my bedroom, and walk down the hall towards my cousin's room. I peered into the bedroom that she shares with my aunt, and there she is, lying peacefully in bed. My aunt is snoring heavily. I knew that she was not awake, so I entered the bedroom and began to plan my revenge for the evil trick that she just played in my bedroom. Except as I get closer, it occurs to me that Ethel is also in a very deep sleep, not just lying there like I was, pretending so that she could trick me. I feel my whole world come crashing down around me. If Ethel is right here, deeply in slumber, then who just came into my room? Who put their hands on my face? Who held my eyes, my nose, and my mouth completely shut? I feel my heart start to race and skip a beat out of complete shock and terror. I check the rest of my family to assure they're all sound and asleep, and then I return to my bedroom. This was not the first time I had heard footsteps in the hallway. My grandmother often got up in the middle of the night to double-check the farmhouse, but there were thoughts racing through my mind as I laid back in bed and tried to collect myself. What if those footsteps were not always my grandmother's? What if the wandering in and out of rooms throughout the night were not my family checking to make sure that we were sleeping soundly? I began to become more aware of my surroundings after this. It took me years to tell this story to anyone in my family for fear of sounding crazy. When I told my mother years later, I was shocked to hear that she also had experiences growing up there, but she never told me about any malicious ghosts. This was just the beginning of my interaction with the paranormal. It has continued throughout my entire life. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.